Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us for today's webinar, Effective Communications for Women in Business, Navigating Your Top 3 Communication Traps. My name is Jeff Murphy. I'm Associate Director in the BU Alumni Relations Office, and I'm also a proud alumnus of the BU Graduate School of Management. Today's webinar is sponsored by the Boston University Alumni Association and is offered to our 300,000 alumni around the globe. Throughout your career, the BU Alumni Association is committed to helping you define and achieve your professional goals. We aim to do this by providing alumni with access to a series of valuable online tools and social media communities. It's important that we get your opinion on how we're doing, so we very much look forward to receiving your feedback via a survey that I'll be emailing you all later today. So for those of you that I know are joining us from as far away as California and Virginia, or if you're just down the street on Com Ave, please know that we really do value your opinion on this and every program that we offer. Before I introduce today's speaker, some brief housekeeping notes. As you know by now, today's webinar is being hosted on the Adobe Connect online meeting platform. If you're having any trouble of any kind with your audio or visual portion of today's presentation, I ask that you please contact Adobe Connect directly, and I'll give you that phone number if you want to jot it down. That's 1-800-422-3623. Today's presentation is being recorded and will soon be made available for on-demand viewing on the BU Alumni Association website, which you can find at www.bu.edu/alumni. Our speaker is very eager to answer questions that you might have today, and you're welcome to submit those at any time using the Q&A chat box that you should see located at the bottom of your screen. We hope to get to as many questions as we can during today's presentation. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our presenter for the day, BU College of Communications alumna Amber Dean Nelson. Amber is the president of Lingo Consulting Incorporated, a Los Angeles-based marketing and communications firm dedicated to helping individuals and organizations learn and leverage their lingo. Her clients include Fortune 500 companies, as well as several corporate work groups and private individuals. Amber is a REVA certified moderator with a degree in journalism from BU. She's the author of the recent publication Effective Communications for Women in Business and is a regular contributor to shenow.org. Additionally, Amber is a member of the National Organization of Women Business Owners and the American Marketing Association. Amber, thanks so much for being with us today. Some of you who joined us a few minutes early might know that we had some technological problems getting Amber up and running. So Amber, thank you for your patience in getting set up. And I will go ahead and get your slides up in just a second here so you can get started.
Thank you. Great. All right, are we ready to go now?
Yeah, you should see your slides coming up in just a second.
Okay, I see them here now. So thank you everybody for joining me today. I'm really excited to be able to do this. As Jeff mentioned, we published a book called Effective Communications for Women in Business back in the springtime and have been speaking about a variety of these communication tips and strategies to help women throughout the work world do their work a little bit more effectively. So we're going to look at today 3 top communication traps. Before we do that, let me tell you a little bit about why I came to BU, because we all have been through the sort of the terrier pathways to get where we are today. When I first came to BU, what I wanted to do was be a journalist, and that's why I went to the school that I did. I wanted to make these really complex ideas accessible and shed light on these sort of shadowy corners of the world and really be a voice for the voiceless. And while I still have those drives, I found a number of other ways to accomplish those goals, which are some of the things that Jeff told you about. My company does qualitative research, which is looking into the hows and whys of human behavior and really understanding what people do in their homes or in their cars or at work when no one's really looking, and use those insights for companies like General Mills and Target to better service their customers. We do a lot of communications consulting, so I work with a lot of executives helping them understand how to connect with their audiences, whether that's their employees or their shareholders or potential board members. And then we do a lot of teaching, so we do workshops and seminars. So that's kind of the work that I do day to day, and couldn't do any of that if I had not come through the ranks at Boston University. So moving right into our top 3 communication traps, the way we've identified them, and this is particular to women, although it definitely applies to men as well, is overcoming over apologizing, ceasing over sharing, and using your words to increase your worth. What we have seen over and over again is that women fall into these traps, and each of these traps are ways that women undermine themselves in their work world. So what we're going to do today is take a look at each one of these areas and figure out a way to work around the traps. And in that process, we'll talk a little bit about what each of them looks like and help you do a little self-assessment to see if you actually are prone to these traps. So we're going to start with overcoming over-apologizing. There are a couple of different things going on with this issue, and if you've been watching media, you will know that media is really driving this conversation. This has become a major issue in the last year or so. Big companies that have a largely female consumer base have started looking around them and finding issues to latch onto that can connect them in powerful and positive ways to women and girls. So you may have seen an ad released by Pantene. It's the hair care company. They released an ad called Sorry Not Sorry, and it completely exploded online and spurred stories on CNN, Slate Magazine, NBC News, and even the Wall Street Journal did a piece about this Sorry Not Sorry idea. The idea being that women apologize when no apology is necessary. And so that drives the question, why women and not men? Are women really more sorry than men? And what they have found is that we absolutely do apologize more than men, but there are some interesting reasons behind that. So Jeff, if we can just look at that first poll question, I'm curious to get your input, why you think women apologize more frequently than men. You can just click the button there to whichever answer makes the most sense to you. Is it because women have a broader definition of what constitutes offensive behavior, because they place a higher value on relationships, or because they have a lower threshold for conflict? And while you are voting on that, we'll give that a minute or two to come in. I want to let you know that Scientific American even had a piece on this issue, and that a number of researchers in the social sciences either went back to dust off old research to readdress this question publicly and through the media, and they even did some new research to see kind of with our current culture if it is indeed true that women apologize more frequently than men. So what we know is that women absolutely do apologize more than men, and it has a lot to do with the purpose of our apologies. By and large, men apologize when they believe they've done something wrong. And women apologize when we believe we've done something wrong, but also as a way to show empathy, and we do it as a kind of knee-jerk reaction. We show empathy by apologizing when we hear someone say, "Oh, I had a bad day." We'll say, "Oh, I'm sorry." But did we cause the bad day? No, this is just a social conversational construct that we use on a regular basis. We apologize when we're already busy and someone makes a request of us. Think about the last time someone said to you, "Can you take a meeting at 2?" And you said, "I'm sorry, no, I can do it at 4." When you put the "I'm sorry" in there, that undermines your effectiveness and your power in many ways. We apologize when we scoot our chairs in for people to get past us in a conference room. We apologize as a conversation filler on a pretty regular basis. So looking back at our poll here, this is interesting. So we have 51% of you say it's that women have a lower threshold for conflict, and 36% say that they place a higher value on relationships. And only 11.5% of people chose what research shows is the right answer. What we understand from the research that has gone through a pretty rigorous study is that women apologize more than men because we have a broader definition of what constitutes offensive behavior. So what happens is when someone engages in a behavior, women way earlier than men say that is not an acceptable behavior, and thus the apology funnel is set up. We certainly place a high value on relationships, but that is not what the differentiator is for us. And the threshold for conflict, that hasn't been proven out either in terms of why we apologize more than men do. Let's see here. So what we really have in terms of this apology issue is 3 ways forward to even the playing field. We can either make men apologize more, which could be a little bit of a trick. We could make women apologize less, which is what we'll be talking about a little bit today. Or we can just accept the imbalance. So let's take a look at what over-apologizing does before we figure out which way will make the most sense for us to go. First of all, let's look at how apologies can cause damage. Now, this is something that I often get quizzical looks about. How can apologies do any kind of damage? That's a empathy building, that's a relationship building sort of behavior. But what happens is that, like the boy who cried wolf, repeated apologies lose their meaning. When I tell you that I'm sorry and I do it with sincerity, and I only do it once because I really owe you an apology, you're going to be able to feel that. You'll recognize it for a true expression of regret. But when I apologize several times in the same day for things as varied as calling to ask you a question, you pick up the phone and I say, I'm so sorry, but I just need to ask you this quick question. When I apologize for telling you that I can't make it on Tuesday, but I can make it on Friday. And then I apologize again for telling the boss that I know that you didn't turn in that report that you were supposed to turn in, or in some other way engage in a behavior that really does require an apology. All of those apologies run together and they lose their potency. So the more often that you engage in the same behavior, the less powerful it is. So that's one way in which apologies can cause some damage for us. The other part is that apologies can cause this perception of wrongdoing. If you didn't do something wrong, but you're apologizing for it, you are suggesting that you indeed did do something wrong. And if you apologize enough, you look like you are either always in the wrong or that you are having delusions of grandeur, that what you do really does impact the world in significant ways every single turn you make. The last part here is that it can impact the balance of power. Frequent apologies, when you are the person doing all of the apologizing, you're the person consistently asking for forgiveness. You're handing another person control over whether or not you're okay, whether or not you are forgiven. The person apologizing is by definition less powerful than the person to whom they are apologizing. Now, there are certainly exceptions to this, as there are with any set of rules, but by and large, in a business setting, if you are the person apologizing, you're the person with less power. There is absolutely a time and a place for apologizing at work and understanding the balance that happens in terms of a power shift. But I would suggest that your apologies that happen at work, that happen in a business setting, should be considered apologies that happen on the rare occasion when you really do make an error. When you actually do make a transgression, it's important for you to own that and to make it right. So that's a little bit about how frequent apologies or over-apologizing can cause damage. We're going to go on here and look at how apologies can increase value. So this is the flip side of that apology coin. The first thing that happens is that a good apology can bolster your trust. When you do go off the rails, and it will happen, it happens to all of us, an apology is absolutely in order. And I'm not in any way suggesting that we do away with apologies, only that we eliminate over-apologizing as a default mode. When apologies are delivered well and sincerely, they can, as we say here, bolster trust. A well-timed apology lets others know that you can be trusted, that they can count on you. A good apology builds the empathy that we as women are so driven to build and that we value so strongly. And a good apology also shows others that we are responsible and mature enough to say when we messed up and that we actually show up to fix whatever it is that we have caused a problem with. In order to really understand whether you are an over-apologizer, we want to take a look a little bit at your apology habits. So this is a good place to pause and truly consider. We have so much going on in our business worlds that we're rushing from thing to thing, and we rarely stop to assess these kinds of issues about, do I apologize too much? So I'd love for you to take just a few minutes here. You can certainly use a pen and paper if you would like to. It's something that you can just silently note to yourself, but think a little bit. What are your habits? Are you the person who always apologizes for being late, for being early, for drinking the last cup of coffee, for scooting a chair in? Is apology for you a knee-jerk reaction? When do you most often apologize? Is it when you walk into a meeting? Is it when you are engaging with someone who is your superior? Is it when you ask someone to help you with some sort of work task? Really take a look at when you are most frequently apologizing. And then who most often receives your apologies? This is an interesting one to look at because we often think the person who receives most of our apologies is superior to us. And that's not always true. Women have an interesting habit of apologizing for passing tasks on to junior members of their team or for asking for assistants or others to simply do their jobs. We apologize for that often. Think about why you apologize. Are you just filling time? Are you apologizing because you truly made a mistake? Are you apologizing because you feel like there's some sort of bridge to be mended? Whether or not it's your bridge, are you the one extending the apology? And then think about how these apologies help or hurt you. If they are well-timed, well-placed apologies, they certainly can bolster trust. They can increase a sense of responsibility and respect for you. But if you're using apologies, overusing apologies, it can hurt you by diluting the power of each of those apologies. When you start tallying up the times you say I'm sorry each day, it's a pretty interesting indicator of whether you fall into the over-apology trap or not. I know that I have asked a number of clients to count the throwaway apologies that she makes every day. And even if you do that within one particular meeting or for your morning, it's an interesting tabulation to see if you are someone who readily says, I'm sorry, without having really anything to apologize for. On this note, if you want to go to YouTube or even Google Pantene Sorry Not Sorry, you'll be able to see that ad, and it really gives a great visual representation of what we're talking about here. If you do mess up, I want to make sure that we talk about how it is that we really should be apologizing, how to give a proper apology. There are 3 steps to a proper apology. You must first express regret. Then you need to take responsibility and provide a remedy. So those are the easy 3 steps, and they start just by naming out loud what it is that you did, take responsibility, say what you did, offer the remedy. For example, I'm so sorry I stepped on your toes at the board meeting yesterday. I completely cut you off when you were talking about your program and it was really thoughtless. I'd like to include your input in meeting notes so that everyone knows what your report was supposed to have been, and I'd like to include your work in the newsletter that we're sending out next week. I know it doesn't completely make up for what I did, but I hope that it will help. So you can see in that case, if I were to do that, I really did. That was a transgression. It was thoughtless, it was unprofessional, and I have started to burn a bridge in that way. And I'm making it up by saying, yes, I sincerely am sorry, and here's the action I'm going to take. Here's the behavior that I'm going to engage in to try to soothe the damage that I've done. What I would ask you to do, please, 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 is don't ever, ever offer excuses or blame someone else for your bad behavior. It's just a grown-up version of the cat ate my homework or the dog ate my homework, and it doesn't get you anywhere in terms of increasing trust or respect. So we're going to move on now to talk a little bit about oversharing, and this again is a particularly female habit. We women are by nature very social animals. We like to connect, and we do a lot of that connecting by talking. When we're off with our girlfriends, that conversation can bond us together and really strengthen that relationship. But when we're at work, we need to be really, really aware of the fine line between good rapport and oversharing. Rapport is simply working together toward the same goal. It generally requires good communication and a sense of harmony, but it does not in any way require friendship. When we confuse real rapport and oversharing, or friendship, we get ourselves into some sticky situations. Before we get to oversharing too deeply, I want to make a quick distinction. Friends at work are a really good thing, and if you don't have friends at work, you should get a couple. Research repeatedly shows that people with at least one good work friend are happier than those without a good work friend. But in this situation, we're just not talking about work friends. We're talking about colleagues, peers, direct reports, supervisors, and we can easily lose sight of that fine line between rapport and oversharing with these people. And we need to remind ourselves that good work happens when we have good rapport. Good rapport is answering a question like, how was your weekend? With, we had a lot of fun. We took the kids out to the mall for pictures and it got a little crazy. How was your weekend? Oversharing, on the other hand, is answering that same question by taking out 22 proofs that you have of those photos of the kids that were taken and telling everyone about the crazy line at the mall to get the photos taken and how you had to shove people left and right and how it drove you to consume like an entire bottle of wine when you got home by yourself. but boy, the pictures are great, aren't they? So what you've done there is completely trespassed the professional boundaries that are so important to creating an environment that is professional. That oversharing, when it trespasses across professional boundaries, does a number on the way that you are regarded at work and the way that you can be, or your effectiveness. The professional boundaries are incredibly valuable because they set up the framework for the way others perceive you. If you just think about that for a minute, how do you want to be perceived? How are you perceived now? When you have good boundaries, that's telling others that you are busy working when you should be working, that you keep the details of your personal life for those who are a part of your personal life. It really sets up the framework beautifully for being effective at work when you can maintain those professional boundaries. And one of the ways you maintain it is by not oversharing. So I know on occasion our impulses are to cross those lines by offering unsolicited advice about maybe a coworker's shopping problem, or someone has come in too late repeatedly and you think that you can solve their problem. That's an impulse. It's also an impulse to tell everyone about the great juice cleanse you're on and telling them how they all should do it too. But think about the message that sends to those around you. The message it's sending is that you have the right answers, that you're going to give them all of your personal baggage in proof of those right answers. And that doesn't set you up in any way to be an effective leader or to be an effective communicator. So when you think about the message that sends to those around you, you'll be able to decide whether that kind of sharing is really in your best interest. And that simply comes down to taming our own impulses. So oversharing, now that we've defined a little bit about what it looks like and how it can start to cause problems for us, let's look at how it decreases effectiveness. When you overshare, you're eroding respect and you're wasting time. It's really hard for most people to jump between seeing these killer negotiating skills you have and your passion for all things American Idol. What the human brain tends to do is it tends to choose one idea and stick with it. It's really hard for us to have dissonant ideas in our minds. We really struggle to reconcile those competing ideas. So unless there's someone else in your office who also just loves American Idol, and that is your work friend, and that's the thing that two of you talk about, you're really wasting other people's time by rehashing the latest episode, or you're kind of holding them hostage when you tell them about the viewing party you had last night. Neither of those options makes you a powerful communicator. Oversharing also has this odd impact of creating a false sense of intimacy on the part of the talker. If I come into work today and I tell you about a personal experience I have, it creates, at least for me, a sense of closeness. You may wonder why in the world I'm choosing to tell you about my Match.com date, but I think you've been a great listener, and I'm ready to come back and tell you about the next date too. I think we're creating a friendship, and you're trying to figure out how you can avoid me at work. This false sense of intimacy is something we really need to watch out for because it's all on the part of the talker. That's all on our part. And it can be tricky to determine what's a false sense of intimacy and what is a true sense of intimacy or closeness with people at work. And then imagine if I did, let's just pretend that I did tell you about this Match.com date. And then a few weeks later, we're in a staff meeting and we're all talking about this potential new client. Let's say it's a restaurant chain. You could easily call me out by telling everyone that I had a Match.com date there and ask what I thought of the romantic ambiance. And I would be turning several shades of red because I thought that that was something I just told you. And now everybody on our staff knows that I have been out on Match.com dates, that I apparently am looking for some kind of love life, that I don't have a love life. And all of these cats are out of the bag. And I did that to myself. I made it their business when I shared it with a work colleague. Sharing it with a work friend, again, is a whole different thing. But when you share these things that seem like just little vignettes of your life, what you're really doing is planting vulnerability landmines for yourself that can come back and bite you. So it becomes this issue of knowing when to say, what to say to who, and when to share it. Some of the ways around this are to stick to just the facts. And we're going to get into that in just a moment. But if we could, Jeff, put up our second poll question now. The second poll question, what I want to know is your opinion on what percentage of our conversation is made up of personal stories and gossip. This question is relevant because so much of our work lives are spent talking to one another. And I'm watching the answers come in here. We'll give that a few minutes, and I will say I'm curious here. Huh. I still see people coming in, so we'll give it just a second. But you'll see that what I've done with this Just the Facts idea is gone back to my Boston University inverted pyramid from School of Journalism. Let's see. I think we'll stop there. What we have is 51, about 50% of people say it's 50% of our conversations made up of personal stories and gossip. About 38% say 65, and less than 10% of you thought most of our conversation was made up of personal stories and gossip. The right answer is 65%. There is a gentleman whose name is Jeremy Shue, and he had an article in Scientific American in which he was able to verify that 65% of our conversation is about personal stories, including gossip. So my point here in bringing this up is that we want to make sure that we are telling the right stories at work. If we're going to be spending more than half of our time sharing these kinds of stories, let's make sure they're effective. Let's make sure that they are not impacting our effectiveness at work. There we go. So what we want to do here to avoid oversharing is just start with the facts. What we're going to do is think about the inverted pyramid of journalism. It starts with the hard facts that matter. And those hard facts might be, it's the big headline stuff, a building burned down, or someone was arrested. Or in the case of a work conversation, let's say I just turned in a massive report. Then we're going to share more as needed. So I might say that I worked hard on the report, that I pulled in a lot of resources from other departments, and that we learned a lot in the process of putting together this report. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to let my superiors or others ask if they want more. When my manager wants some detail on who contributed from another department, that's my opening to tell her how hard I worked and how I pulled together a collaborative team and why those people were necessary or how they weren't pulling their weight. What the truth is that most managers want direct reports who will get the job done without any drama. So what you need to do is be able to present the work that you have done and give them plenty of openings for seeking out more information from you. What you really don't want to do is start your conversation with a laundry list of other people's shortcomings or by outlining your heroics. That doesn't instill confidence in you or your work. It outs you as an oversharer. It outs you as a gossip. It outs you as someone who wants to point to other people for their problems. And that does not do you any good at all in terms of creating a more effective work environment for you. So the workarounds for this, in addition to thinking about that inverted pyramid style, is the first thing we want to do is right size your sharing by assessing your audience. So this is a little bit like when I was asking you to go back and look at how frequently you apologize. This again creates or requires a certain amount of self-awareness. So what we'll do is look at these 3 questions and consciously decide what you share and why. So let's say we're talking about my boss. What is my boss's style? I may know that when I go in and talk to my boss, he wants to talk about the kids and the weekend and really ramp up before we get into the nitty-gritty of work. So I'm following his lead, as in I'm letting him say what he needs to say. I am not also telling him all about my weekend and all about my children. I will certainly tap on those things because I want to make sure that I'm mirroring back to him appropriately to create empathy between us and to create a strong environment or relationship for us. But I follow his style. What's the power dynamic? If it's my boss again, I know that he's the one who is or should be guiding the conversation. I will, when it is appropriate, allow him to say what we're talking about and when, and I will really watch the way that I talk to him based on our power dynamic. Then I have to figure out what is my goal. If it is, again, the CEO, my goal with him might be to look like I know what I'm doing. My goal might be to be effective. My goal might be to let him know that I have the skills it will take for the next job up the corporate ladder. The fact is that the way you talk to the CEO is really, really different than the sharing you'll do with a direct report or a work friend. And it's your job, in order to maintain your own professional efficiency and effectiveness, it's your job to moderate yourself, to modulate how you talk to that friend and how you talk to that CEO. So I'm not suggesting that you go through this process every single time you have a conversation, but it is definitely helpful to take a look at the people you most frequently talk to at work and come up with a broad approach for each of them. That allows you to maintain those boundaries we talked about earlier. You know what you are looking for from these particular coworkers. You know how to interact with them. So when you find yourself frustrated by the flat tire this morning, or the kid who got a bad grade on his report card, or any of those issues, you know where it's okay to talk about those things without impacting your own professional effectiveness. All right, so along these same lines, I would encourage you to take the time to recognize your own reasons for sharing the things that you have to say. Are you simply filling a silence? And I will tell you that we women do this a lot. It's hard for us to sit in a conversation where there is silence. But I will tell you that silence is your friend, and that often others will move to fill in the silence, and you will learn all sorts of interesting things. Assess for yourself, are you trying to forge a bond? Or do you want to share the backstory of some issue as a way to prove your dedication? In some cases, that's great. You can say that you did a lot of research. You can say that you pulled in other teams. But when you tell a story like, I was up all night, I drank 3 pots of coffee, I barely got it done in time, but here I am. When your boss hears that, you have to think about whether that kind of sharing will benefit you or whether it will hurt you. And again, this depends on their perspective. Do they want people who are in that crisis management mode? Is that something that's really going to make you look like you're the hard trier, like you're the one who will stay up all night and you're super dedicated? Or do you work in a kind of environment where that kind of behavior just shows that you were a poor planner? That's part of understanding the environment in which you work. The next thing you'll do is assess the value and impact of the information you're providing. From a professional stance, does someone really need to know what you have to say? Are you just informing them so that they can do their job better? How will it help them? What impact will it have when you share this information with them? And in personal terms, what's the value and impact? So how are you opening yourself up or allowing people to, or not maintaining your boundaries in the way that you really should? So take that all-nighter, for example. Yeah, you want your boss to know that you worked hard, and it's up to you to know how your boss will perceive you if he knows that you had to stay up all night on a project that you're working on for 6 weeks. You have to figure out, does that make you look like a dedicated worker or a bad planner? And you need to know that before you start talking. And that's where the self-assessment part comes in. Oversharing can be a real detriment, and it can be really, really hard to overcome. But if you're serious about being taken seriously in your career, it actually is quite worth the effort to stop oversharing. Next, we're going to look at using your words to increase your worth. So we're going to go from using too many words to using just the right words. We come to this idea that you can increase your worth simply by changing the words you use to describe yourself and what you do. So the illustration we have here, you can see there are 2 glasses here, and they are substantially the same thing. But in one lens, we say it's half full, and the other we say it's half empty. It's the exact same thing, and depending on what's in those glasses, one of those assessments is going to be better. If it's a half empty glass of water or a half empty glass of pure gold, that feels kind of empty. If it's a half full glass of poison, we're going to say that's pretty full. So it completely depends on what the environment is as to the language that you use and how that language is perceived. And that idea is in direct contrast with what you'll see down here at the bottom, this quote from William Shakespeare. His contention is that a rose by any other name would be as sweet. And I would say to our good friend Will, not true. Perhaps when you're trying to talk yourself out of a situation in which you're in love with an enemy of your family, I can kind of see his point. But here and now, what we know is that words are incredibly powerful, and the way that we use them can give us huge benefits in the work world. So I'm going to tell you a story about this guy. His name is Adam Braun. I don't know if any of you have heard of him or not before, but he started out in the world of finance, and he was a real go-getter, got his MBA. He was working his way up the corporate ladder, pulling a lot of those all-nighters that I mentioned before, and he was rewarded for that. That's the kind of behavior his company wanted to see. And he got to a point where he did not feel fulfilled. He wanted to do more. So what he did, literally, was quit his very cushy job, um, and started a nonprofit. And he called it Pencils of Promise. And their goal is to go around the world and create educational opportunities where they don't currently exist. In some cases, that means building schools, but he does a lot of traveling to try to see where education can impact developing communities. What he found, as he went back to his folks in the finance industry and wanted to talk with them about his nonprofit, he wanted to say to them, here is great work that you can be a part of. I know you have the financial means. I know you have the status. Don't you want to give back to this project? And what he found is that as soon as he launched into as soon as they got past the, hey, Adam, how are you? What have you been doing these days? And he would say, I started a nonprofit. All of these finance folks would just glaze over. They would no longer pay attention. They were all about for-profit. They were all about making money, gaining money. If they have something that is nonprofit, that is not for profit, they have failed. So what he did was started referring to his company's goal as a for-profit or for-purpose goal or for-purpose organization. And what he found is that by changing the words you use to describe something, you can change how others perceive it. And what happened in his situation is that when he changed the words nonprofit to for purpose, it absolutely changed everything for him. Doors that were closed opened up, and other agencies even adopted his language, and for purpose really became the new way to say nonprofit. This book, The Promise of a Pencil, is actually a great read, and I encourage all of you to take a look at it. But if the one thing that you can pull away from this is that changing the words you use to describe something, you change how others perceive it, it's a reality. And he was able to pretty much give us a case study on it. So we're going to look here at how you use words to describe yourself. This is another place where I'd encourage you to get out a pen and paper and write this down, or simply do a mental check. But think about the words you used to describe yourself and what you do the last time you introduced yourself professionally. It might have been to a potential client, might have been at a networking event, might have been when someone came into your office. But think about how you introduced yourself. And while you're replaying those scenarios in your head, let's take a look at our final poll question, if we could, Jeff. So what we pulled out here for you to take a look at is we found a statistic that tells us what percentage of college-aged women actively minimize themselves through body-shaming comments. We don't have this same kind of statistic available for how many women minimize themselves and their abilities at work. This is the closest we could come to, but I'm sure you can see how the idea is transferable, that if we speak poorly about ourselves in one context, we're likely to do it in another context. Wow. I think we have more voters. I see 39 people have voted for the 93%, and I think 39 is the highest number we've had on any of these polls so far. What I will tell you is that those of you who say 93% of college-age women have actively minimized themselves through body shaming comments are right. What we know is that according to the Journal of Psychology of Women Quarterly, 93% of college-aged women engage in what they call fat talk, or pointing out their perceived flaws regularly. This is actually toxic behavior, and it not only convinces others of your imagined inadequacies, but it has real negative physical impacts as well. When we talk like that about ourselves, we increase our cortisol levels, and we do quite a number of biologic. So if we shift from this idea of fat talk or to the idea of how we talk about ourselves at work or professionally, what I want to leave you with is the understanding that your words make a huge difference in the way you're perceived. You can absolutely say that you work in IT and no one really knows what that means. Or you could say you run a team that develops security software that protects hospital records. You could work in a lab, or you could be researching a cure for brain cancer. So I'm sure that you can see the differences in the way those words give you an image of who that person is. A person who works in IT, I don't know what that is. They sit in a room with computers? Is that what they do? But when you can figure out the what and the why, you're getting to a place where we're starting to use words that increase worth and have a little more power. And the way that you can figure those things out is to figure out for yourself what your superpowers are. I'm just putting 3 questions here as starters, because if you struggle even a little bit with finding the right words to describe who you are and what you do, these questions could be incredibly helpful in terms of developing clarity. So start out just by figuring out what you love to do. When you're at work, what's the thing that makes you feel just happy? What's the thing you could do all day long? Where do you get the most joy at work? And then you can think about what you're great at doing. Making people laugh or helping people understand complex mortgage lending rules. Maybe you make handmade crafts. Whatever it is that you're really good at doing. And to be clear, what you are good at doing doesn't always line up with what you love to do. And then finally, take a look at what you regularly get thanked for at work. Do you get thanked for saving people in a crisis, for rescuing them? Do you get thanked for delivering compelling narratives on tax law? Do you get thanked for listening? Really pay some attention to the way people talk to you and what they thank you for, and that will tell you what they perceive as your superpowers. And once you have a list of words and ideas about what you love to do, what you're great at doing, what you're thanked for, you can begin to put together what your superpowers are. And the thing about this is that those superpowers can really help others perceive you as both super and powerful. And the way that those go together is a little bit, you want to say what you're doing, so it's not just I work in IT. You want to say why you're doing it. I protect hospital records. When you're able to connect for people what you do, how you do it, why you do it in a single sentence or 2, you're really helping them draw a picture of who you are. And if you'll recall, a little earlier, I suggested that we have a hard time holding more than one idea in our head at a time about others. So if I'm going to tell you that I just work in IT, and then I follow up with I protect hospital records, you're only going to hear one of those. So when you have people's attention, give them the right one to pay attention to. Before we wrap up, I'm going to give you a few more tips here. First, listen to yourself. And this will make you a better communicator in almost all ways. And when I say listen to yourself, I don't mean listen to the Jiminy Cricket consciousness idea, that voice in your head. What I mean is literally listen to the words coming out of your mouth. Be aware of what you say, be aware of how you say it, and pay attention to whether it's serving you. When you start to listen to the words that you say, it can be really, really surprising. And I will tell you that the exercise of jotting down how many times a day you apologize and jotting down how you describe yourself, those things will help you to become more effective in everything that you do, whether it is something at work, whether it's at home, whether it's in a volunteer role. When you know what words you're saying, you are much better able to manage them, and that increases your effectiveness and the way you're perceived exponentially. Next, listen to others. And when I say this, I'm not suggesting that you go to others for advice or what have you. What I'm suggesting is that you find a communications role model or 2 and emulate them. You might pick a woman in your company who is incredibly well-spoken and well-respected. You might find a woman in the UN who has taken the floor and done beautiful things and changed policy. Or you might just find a woman at, your daughter's school. What matters is that you recognize powerful communication when you see it, and that you work to make yourself a powerful communicator. This process of learning to be a great communicator never ends. It's an ongoing process that consistently changes. And then finally, challenge yourself. Maybe it's that you count the number of times you say I'm sorry in a day, and then you try to reduce that number so that your apologies truly mean something to those around you. Or maybe you challenge yourself to say a little less the next time someone asks you for personal information at work. Or maybe you find those superpower words that describe you and start using them, but with confidence. So that is the bulk of the material that I want to cover today. But I also want to let you know that BU alumni who are on this call can get all 10 commandments. We've talked about 3 of them today, but you can get all 10 of them in a free download of my ebook, Effective Communications for Women in Business. All you have to do is go to that URL you see there. It's eepurl.com/8AT and you can get a free download of that ebook and take a look at all 10 commandments. And there is a section in the back of it that talks about how to apply those commandments. I encourage you to do that, and you can always reach me by email if you have any questions or inquiries. Amber@lingoconsultinginc.com. And I think we are just about at 9:45. So Jeff, if we have any questions or anything else to discuss, I'm happy to do that now.
Great, thanks, Amber. A reminder to everybody, please use the question and answer chat box at the bottom of your screen to type in a question. We did save a few minutes to go through Q&A, so now's your chance to get that in. I also want to ask everybody to go ahead and jot down that URL. Amber, thank you so much for making your ebook available to everybody. I know that's a really great benefit for the people who've joined us today. And would you, one more time, maybe just mention your email address for people since you offered?
Sure. It's Amber, AMBER, at lingoconsultinginc.com. It's LINGO consultinginc.com.
Great, thanks. Not to put you on the spot, but the first question that came in was from Jenna, and she's wondering how she might be able to get her hands on a copy of your slides. Obviously, this is probably falls under intellectual property for you, but is that something that you're willing to share with folks?
It definitely depends on the usage. If she's able to send me an email or a note and just let me know what the usage is, I'd be happy to give permission where it's appropriate.
Great, thank you very much. One of the questions that came in, you talked about quite a bit, but the question was, how do you best deal with a coworker who's an overshare, particularly someone who's in a position of authority and regularly creates all of the issues being described? Certainly you talked about that a little bit, Amber, but any other comments about how to deal with a coworker who's an overshare?
Yes, and I just want to check, you said this is a person who would be in a senior position?
Yeah, the question was, somebody who's in a position of authority.
Okay, so it's my boss traps me into listening to all sorts of craziness that goes on in their life. Is sort of, it sounds like the setup.
That's the vibe I get from the question.
Okay. Well, there are a couple of things. There are, one I would say is allow for silence, because when you do not agree, when someone says, I'm trying to think of a crazy example that's happened in my own life. When someone comes in and says that they found out that their husband is cheating on them and there's this huge big drama that goes on, we give these cues. Some of them are nonverbal, some are verbal. But the cues that we give are, we might nod a head, we might smile, we might say, oh my gosh. And every time we do that, what we're actually saying is, yes, please go on. Yes, I hear you. Yes, please tell me more. And so it's reeling those back in gently, because it's a person who is in an authoritative position. So we gently reel those in. We maybe do that once for every 3 times we normally would have, so they can see we're not fully engaged. We're not shutting them down. We're not having a scene, because again, it's a person in a position of power. But you engage with them less and take to them when this happens, if you can have something in your back pocket that is a business issue you need to talk to them about. So maybe it's, I don't know, let's say you need a new printer. I'm making things up here, but you need a new printer and they start with their drama. You acknowledge their drama, but just a very little bit, just the least amount that you can get by with without being out and out rude, and say something along the lines of, actually, I'm glad I ran into you because I need to talk to you about getting a new printer. So you're changing the subject and you're just not engaging as heavily with them. And eventually what they will learn is that you are not the person to come to with this. They are not getting what they want from you. What they want from you is someone to engage in the drama with them and someone to help them rehash all of this, because they're getting a kind of emotional charge out of that. Just don't give it to them. And the ways you can do that is by giving them fewer cues to continue and changing the subject in a way that makes sense. I also would suggest that do not ever get sucked into saying, yes, I know, and when my husband cheated last month, here's what happened to me. Don't engage with them. And it's a process. You're not going to get this done in one shot. You're not going to get this done in one conversation. It's training, and it will take several interactions before they start to understand that you're not fun and you're not going to play this game with them.
Another question, Amber, sort of what you touched on already, but and I'm paraphrasing a question here from Anina. To go along with the topic of communicating what your job is, do you have any suggestions for doing a great job of explaining a position that very few people would understand what it is that you do? So I think Anina's getting at, she has a hard time explaining what her role is. Any exercises she could go through or tips you'd have for her to create an easier explanation?
Yeah, and it's a very simple answer, but it's really, really hard to do. And that is to simplify the heck out of the job that you do. Which means, if you work on, I'm trying to think, is there any way to find out what she does?
Anina, do you want to go ahead and maybe give us a little bit more information about your question? You can just type that into the Q&A. Plastics manufacturing.
And so who is her client? Who does what with the plastics that she manufactures?
Other businesses. She says that everybody wants specifics about what she does and that her clients are other businesses.
Okay. So I would look at what problem does she solve? That is a good place to start. So maybe what she's doing is providing, it's kind of hard with not having a lot of information for what she does. But the idea is that you want to look at what problem that you solve. So in the case the example that I gave of the IT worker, what they actually do is they protect business records. So maybe what she actually does, is provides materials for people who make knee replacements. It's some human element and what problem she solves. And again, that's the kind of thing, Anina, if you want to send me an email, I'm happy to email back and forth with you a little bit to figure out how to set you up for that. But it really comes down to simplifying it in a way that's accessible to your audience. And if your audience is just somebody at a networking event, not an industry expert, so they wouldn't know if you use particular jargon, they wouldn't know what that means. But what you want to look for is what problem do you solve and how can you communicate that to just kind of the man on the street, the average Joe. But again, if you want to send me an email, I'm happy to help you work through that.
Great, thanks. Karen is asking Amber, I'll give you the right to not answer this if you choose to. It's fairly personal. Okay. But she wants to know what your superpowers are.
Oh, that is such a good question. Yes, I will tell you my 3, and I will say that sometimes they change depending on the environment, but definitely accessibility. I'm able to connect with just about anybody, just about anywhere. That comes from my work as a focus group moderator and also from just my life. So accessibility is one of my superpowers. Simplification. I can take very complex ideas and make them understandable to just about any environment. And I would tell you humor. Those are the 3 things: accessibility, humor, and the ability to simplify really complex issues.
Great. We've got a lot of questions.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
We've got a lot of questions that have come in, and I want to try to make sure that we get to ones that I think are the most applicable to everybody on the call. Anne has asked a question: how do you respond without alienating coworkers who want you to continue oversharing after you've privately vowed not to?
Well, I would say that you engage in a little bit of hazy conversation. So I'm trying to think about an example. I know one of the things that women, with some of my clients that I go in and I hear women sharing things about diets and love lives and all sorts of things that I think, I hope your boss can't hear you. And what happens, or what I would recommend in those situations, is you can absolutely nod and smile and you can redirect. So someone can come to you and say, oh, you look really thin. Did you do that juice cleanse? And you are absolutely it's absolutely okay for you to say, oh, you know what? Love to talk about it, but I have a meeting in 2 minutes. Or you can redirect. I would redirect, and what I have found often does not work and really does cause problems for people is if you say out loud, I am no longer talking about personal issues. That turns people off, and it causes a little bit of dissonance for them. But you can redirect, you can be too busy, you can ask about them. There are a number of ways around it, but it's a little bit of the same situation with a supervisor who wants to overshare. What you need to do is just make sure they understand it's not fun for them anymore. You won't play their game anymore. And it takes time, and it takes duplication of the experience. They will come to you and try again, and they will try again, and they will try again. I know that the sort of Emily Post answer is that you say things like, I'm not comfortable sharing personal information. And depending on your work environment, maybe that works for you. But by and large, protecting your own space and keeping those boundaries really firm is a complex human process. And the most gentle, effective way I've seen to do it is to just not engage, which you can do by redirecting, which you can do by being busy, which you can do by not giving them the positive reinforcement that they're looking for.
Great. Amber, I think a lot of the other questions that remain are ones that you've touched on. They just all have sort of a similar, maybe some minor differences to them. So I would ask this. I noticed that you had created a discussion post on our Boston University alumni group. And so what I would ask, and all of the folks on the call today, in addition to emailing Amber, she's obviously made her email address available and is very excited to chat with all of you. I think what would be great is if I would ask folks to maybe post questions on that discussion post that Amber created on LinkedIn. For those of you who aren't on LinkedIn yet, I really encourage you to, maybe this is a great chance to create a profile. You can find our official Boston University alumni a LinkedIn group, which has over 30,000 members at this point, by going to the web at bu.edu/alumni/LinkedIn. And Amber, I'm guessing you'd be willing to maybe keep an eye on that post for the next few days and respond to other questions that come in?
Oh, absolutely. It actually sounds like a lot of fun, so I hope people will hop over and ask questions there. And it's definitely a place where not only would people from this call benefit from those questions, but folks from the broader LinkedIn community that are affiliated with BU could benefit as well.
Absolutely.
It has that added piece.
Yeah. And again, for those of you who aren't already a member, you can find the group at bu.edu/alumni/LinkedIn if you have any trouble getting in. It's a private group, so it'll take us some time to actually prove that you're an alum, and we'll get you approved for the group. If you have any trouble, people can reach out to me as well. Amber, as you and I discussed briefly, this webinar, we hit our registration capacity within just a few hours of actually promoting it. So obviously there's a huge demand amongst our alumni population for this discussion specifically, and on behalf of our 300,000 alumni around the globe, I just really want to thank you for doing this presentation today.
Oh, it is such a pleasure. It's so much fun to share this information. If we had the time to sit down and really consciously think about the way we communicate every day, I'm sure that there are many people who would come to these conclusions on their own. But taking the space and the time out of your day, everyone who is on the call, is a huge gift to yourself. And I'm so grateful to be able to be here and help along that journey. And if I may, I just want to say hi to Amy Stickle. She was my roommate in BU in a study abroad program in Sydney, and I can see she's on the call. And I just want to say hi, Amy.
That's great. Connecting people from across the seas.
Absolutely.
Well, I want to also thank all of our guests for participating today, and I hope that many of you will join us for our December 10th webinar. We've got an alumnus named Jean Hill, who is a life sciences venture capitalist, going to be presenting a session called Due Diligence, Lessons Learned from a Serial Healthcare Entrepreneur. I think this is going to be a great session for anybody who has their own business or who is going through the startup process and looking for funding, or anybody who works in the healthcare or healthcare tech industries. You can sign up for that session now on our website. Again, that's bu.edu/alumni. And as always, if you or any BU alumni you know would be interested in presenting a webinar like this for the BU Alumni Association, please feel free to contact me at the Alumni Relations Office, or you can email me directly at jtmurphy@bu.edu. That's J as in Jeff, T as in Thomas, or terrific, as I like to say, murphy@bu.edu. Thank you, everybody, for your time. Amber, thank you again. I hope you all have a great day or a great evening, or, Amber in Los Angeles, a great morning. Thank you all, and take care.